Meline had no idea that attending her brother's birthday party would be the moment everything unraveled. She hadn't stepped foot inside her childhood home in nearly 3 years. The driveway still had that faint oil stain where Marcus once crashed Dad's lawnmower, and the same plastic lawn flamingos swayed a little in the southern evening breeze. But the weight pressing on her chest had little to do with nostalgia. It was the familiar ache of returning to a place that never quite felt like hers. The porch light flicked on as she approached, casting a warm glow over the screen door. Through the glass, she spotted her mother adjusting napkins on the sideboard and her father laughing a little too loudly at something Marcus said. The house looked unchanged, same oak furniture, same flowered curtains, but something in the air felt rehearsed, like a play waiting for the curtain to rise. When she stepped in, the temperature rose a few degrees. Marcus turned and gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, look who made it," he said, arms spread wide like a game show host. Their mother followed quickly behind with a forced brightness. "Meline. We didn't think you'd come. You're always so busy with your tech things." Meline forced a polite nod, handing over a bottle of wine. "Just wanted to celebrate Marcus." The gathering was modest, just family, a couple of Marcus's friends, and a neighbor or two. Still, the air pulsed with a quiet tension, masked beneath birthday banners and the scent of vanilla frosting. Her parents ushered her around the room like an honored guest, repeatedly announcing her job title to anyone who didn't ask. "Senior software engineer at Cloudbound," her mother said with a proud chuckle. "She owns her own penthouse now, can you believe it?" But there was something in the tone that rubbed Meline wrong. Not pride, positioning. Like a subtle build-up to something else. Dinner passed with polite smiles and shallow questions. Marcus dominated the conversation, recounting half-finished business ideas and casual flops with the self-assurance of someone who'd never heard the word accountability. Every time Meline tried to contribute, the attention shifted back to Marcus. He laughed at his own jokes, slouched with practiced ease, accepted every compliment as if owed. Then came the question. One of Marcus's friends, Jason, maybe, or Jared, grinned and said, "So, when are you moving into your sister's penthouse, man?" The room froze for a second too long. Meline looked up, confused, her fork pausing midair. "What?" she said, trying to keep it light. Marcus laughed, nudging his glass. "Don't worry, I'll take care of the plants." Her mother chimed in quickly. "It just makes sense. He's trying to get back on his feet. Your place has more than enough room." Meline's pulse picked up. "No one ever asked me that." The silence was deafening. Her father coughed. Her mother sipped her wine without looking up. Marcus shrugged. "Mom said you'd be open to it. I mean, we're family, right?" She stared at them, really stared, and something in her cracked. All those years of being the reliable one, the quiet achiever, the one who sent birthday cards and checks when rent was due. Suddenly it all looked like a stage. She wasn't the star. She was the backdrop. And that's when Meline realized, the party was never about Marcus. It was a setup for her surrender. She looked around the table and realized she wasn't being celebrated, she was being cornered. The laughter inside still rang too loud. It bounced off the wallpapered walls like something artificial, too polished, too rehearsed. Meline stepped out onto the back porch, needing air, needing space. The wood beneath her heels creaked the same way it had when she was 16 and used to sneak out to stare at the stars, wondering if there was more to life than tiptoeing around her brother's tantrums. She took a slow breath, letting the evening chill cool the flush on her cheeks. Her arms wrapped around her midsection more out of instinct than cold. Inside, Marcus was the gravity. The orbit. She'd merely been the moonlight. The sliding door creaked open behind her. "There you are," Marcus said, stepping out with a beer in hand. "You disappeared." She didn't look at him. "Needed some air." He leaned against the railing beside her, looking out at the dark yard like he owned it. "Can't believe how fast time flies, huh? You with your penthouse. Me still, figuring stuff out." Meline said nothing. He continued, casually, I'm thinking it might not be forever, you know? Just a few months. Crash at your place. Get my head straight. Mom and Dad think it's a good idea. Her fingers curled into her sleeves. Marcus, I wasn't told. I was told what's going to happen. He smiled, sheepishly. Come on, Mel. You've got what, 2 bedrooms just sitting there? I'm your brother. And I've already sent you rent money. Covered your car when it broke down. Paid for your last laptop. His tone shifted. Wow. Okay. So now you're keeping score? No, she said quietly. But apparently everyone else is. He scoffed and walked back toward the door. You've changed. She watched him disappear into the house again. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until the door clicked shut behind him. Then came her mother. Sweetheart, the older woman began, stepping carefully into the dark. Don't let Marcus get under your skin. He just feels a little lost right now. Meline turned to face her. Why didn't anyone ask me first? Her mother sighed. We just thought, look, he's going through a tough patch. You know how life kicks some people harder than others. And some people always have a cushion to land on, Meline said. Her mother didn't argue. She simply looked at her with those same eyes Meline had seen her entire life, tired, resigned, quietly expectant. You have so much. We're just asking you to share. No, you're not asking, Meline said. You're arranging. Her mother's voice softened. You're his only sister. And he's a grown man. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then her mother whispered, he's moving in next week. Meline blinked. Excuse me? Your father will help him with the boxes. It's settled. She stood up, looked her mother in the eye, and said, I need to go home. Alone. Even in her own home, Meline felt like she was being haunted by voices that didn't belong to her. The penthouse was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't bring peace, but instead amplified the echoes of old words, criticisms, comparisons, questions she never asked to hear again. She had left the birthday party hours ago, but it still clung to her skin like smoke. Her heels clicked softly across the hardwood floor as she passed the foyer and dropped her keys onto the marble counter. Something in her chest didn't settle. A white envelope peeked out from under the door. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Her name, in her mother's cursive. Inside, a folded note, 5 words, no punctuation. Please think about your brother. The handwriting felt colder than any voice could have sounded. She sat on the couch, arms wrapped around her knees like a child, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The lights of the city blinked back at her through the glass walls. High above the streets, her world felt no safer than the chaos she'd just fled from. After a while, she stood, walked to her desk, opened her laptop. A blank document glowed softly on the screen. And slowly, her fingers began to type. What I have done for my family. It wasn't for anyone else to read. Not a letter, not a defense. Just a record, a silent testimony. If they ever tried to rewrite her story, at least she'd have it in her own words. She began at 8 years old, the first time Marcus broke the television while playing baseball inside. Their mother came in furious. Before Marcus could say a word, Meline had stepped forward and whispered, "It was me." The sting of the lie remained in her throat for days. She wrote about the high school science fair, when she took first place and came home beaming. Her father only asked, "How's your brother doing in algebra?" The shift was subtle. But it never shifted back. She remembered the college applications. Marcus dropped out of 2 schools, but her parents still drove him to every new orientation like it was a second chance at heaven. Meanwhile, she got a partial scholarship to MIT, and they complained about the out-of-state fees. She had smiled through it all. Because that's what was expected. Be quiet. Be good. Be less so Marcus could be more. A message popped up on her phone. From Leah, her old college roommate, now working in Seattle. "Leah, hey, just thinking of you. That family dinner looked rough. You don't owe them your peace." Meline stared at the words for a while. You don't owe them your peace. The phrase settled somewhere deep. Somewhere she had never dared to name. She continued typing. Every act of sacrifice, every dollar lent and never returned, every compliment that came with a condition. She reached the day she got the offer for her tech job, $180K starting salary, and all her mother had asked was, "Are you sure Marcus can't get in too?" A strange tightness formed in her chest. She hit return a few times. Then typed. "This home is mine, but somehow, it still feels like theirs." She stared at that line, unmoving, as if daring herself to believe it. She closed the laptop and stared into the silence, wondering how long it would be before they tried to take more. They sat at my dinner table, but it felt like I was the stranger in my own home. Meline stood by the oven, watching the timer blink down to its final seconds. The scent of rosemary and garlic chicken filled the penthouse, blending with the faint citrus of the candles she'd lit in the hallway. The table was set, 6 plates, silver cutlery, cloth napkins folded like lilies. She'd spent 2 hours the night before researching how to fold them just right. This dinner was supposed to mean something. Maybe even change something. The elevator dinged. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door with a warm smile. Her parents stood there, her mother in a camel-colored shawl, her father with a half bottle of wine. They stepped in, glancing around with the kind of look that made her pulse throb, calculated admiration. "Nice place," her dad said, looking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that spilled golden hour light across the white granite countertop. Her mother's eyes swept the living room before she nodded. "It's spacious." Meline breathed through her smile. They sat, stiff-backed, on the couch while she poured wine. Her father took a sip and winced. "Bit dry, huh?" Before she could respond, the elevator chimed again. Marcus swaggered in with a grin, sunglasses still on though the sun had dipped. "Smells fancy. You sure this isn't from some meal service?" She laughed it off, motioning everyone to the dining table. It was an oak piece she'd saved months to buy. A quiet pride rose in her chest as she watched them take their seats under the warm pendant lights. Dinner began with small talk. The weather. A neighbor's car. The price of gas. But the tension was a slow-growing fog. Every compliment came with a barb. Her mother noted the white couch was nice, but not very practical, especially if children ever came into the picture. Her father asked if she had considered selling the place and investing more wisely. Marcus, between bites, asked, "So, you live here alone? All this space, just for you?" She nodded, pouring more wine. "Yes, it's been good for my focus." He leaned back, surveying the high ceilings. "That guest room, pretty big, huh? I mean, if I ever needed a place while I figured things out." The words hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. Her mother cleared her throat. "Well," she said, dabbing her mouth, "you know how unstable things have been for Marcus. And you have always been the practical one, Meline. Surely sharing with your brother wouldn't be so hard." "Temporarily, of course." The warmth drained from Meline's face. She glanced at her dessert, untouched. "I just got settled," she said quietly. "I'm still adjusting to the space." "Oh, honey," her mother smiled, "adjusting is easier when you're helping someone. Family is about support." Meline swallowed hard. Her fork scraped porcelain. She looked at her brother, feet kicked out, chewing lazily, and felt something harden inside her. She stood up and brought over the dessert, lemon tart, her mother's old recipe. She placed it gently in the center, sliced a piece, and set it in front of her mother. Her mother looked at it, then glanced at Marcus. "I thought you were going to order in," she said. "Marcus always liked the key lime pie from that bistro." "I baked this," Meline said, sitting slowly. "Well," her father mumbled, "next time, maybe both." The final slice of civility slipped off her plate. Her guest from work, Lisa, whom Meline had invited partly for moral support, shifted uncomfortably. She'd been quiet most of the evening, politely sipping wine. Now, she looked at Meline, then the others, as if realizing the play was already scripted. Marcus pushed his plate forward. "Anyway," he said, "this place is too quiet. I could liven it up. Help with rent too, eventually." That word. Eventually. She looked at him, then her parents, then the polished wood of her table, and felt a throb behind her eyes. The meal was supposed to be a celebration. Instead. I realized then, it wasn't a dinner, it was an ambush. Marcus had already moved some of his boxes in without asking me. The morning sun spilled softly through the tall windows of Meline's penthouse, casting long stripes of light across the hardwood floors. She had planned this Saturday for simple things, rearranging a few bookshelves, rotating her plants, and finally moving the spare bed to make space for a reading nook. But as she opened the closet in the guest room, she froze. 3 large boxes sat tucked in the corner. They weren't hers. One had a torn sneaker poking out the side, another bore the scent of an old dorm room, a strange mix of cologne, dust, and microwaved noodles. On top lay a crumpled duffel bag, half-zipped, with a familiar faded university logo. Her heart sank. It couldn't be. She crouched and pulled open the top flap of the largest box. Inside were some beat-up textbooks, tangled phone chargers, and a half-broken headset. Taped to the inside of the lid was a post-it, "Gotta fix this. Maybe Mel can help." Mel. Only Marcus called her that. She grabbed her phone and dialed. He answered after the 3rd ring, cheerful as ever. "Hey sis. What's up? Did you move your stuff into my place?" A pause. Then, casually, "Yeah. Just a few boxes. Mom said it was okay." "You didn't even ask me, Marcus." "I mean, I figured it was cool. You never said no." Meline closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. "You can't just assume that. This is my home." Another pause. Then a sigh. "Mel, don't make this a thing. It's just temporary." Her voice hardened. "You're treating my space like it's storage. You didn't ask. That's not okay." Before he could respond, she hung up and immediately dialed her mother. "Sweetheart," her mom said, her tone already laced with the kind of condescension Meline recognized all too well, "You know Marcus is going through a hard time. That doesn't give him the right to invade my home. He's your brother. Families help each other. I've helped. More than you know." There was silence on the other end, followed by a familiar defense. "Well, maybe if you weren't so cold about it, none of this would feel like such a problem." Meline stared at the boxes. It wasn't the things inside them that bothered her. It was the unspoken entitlement. The decades of it. The way Marcus coasted and crashed and coasted again, always with someone else paying for the airbag. A knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. Lisa, her closest friend, walked in carrying iced coffees. One glance at Meline's face and she paused. "What happened?" Meline waved toward the guest room. Lisa followed her in, took one look at the boxes, and let out a low whistle. "Well. Subtle." They sat on the couch, coffees untouched. "He didn't even ask," Meline said, her voice softer now, more tired than angry. Lisa tilted her head. "You know what this is, right? It's not about the boxes. It's about boundaries you never got to have." Meline looked down at her hands. "It's just always been like this. If he needs something, I'm supposed to give it. No questions." Lisa reached out, placing a hand on her arm. "You don't owe your family your peace just because they call it love." They sat in silence a moment longer, until the door buzzed. "Marcus." Meline stood. He walked in, keys in hand, already reaching for another duffel bag near the entryway. You're not moving in, she said firmly. He blinked. What? I said you're not moving in. You can't just use my home because you've run out of options. He let out a disbelieving laugh. You're serious? She stepped between him and the hallway. Yes. I am. He stared at her like he didn't recognize who she was, and maybe, in that moment, neither did I. You chose your apartment over your own brother? The words didn't just sting, they stayed. Meline stood at the edge of her mother's front steps, fingers curling into her coat pockets as if trying to hold something in. She hadn't been back since the birthday incident, and the air around the modest suburban house was oddly still, like even the trees held their breath. Inside, the ticking of a wall clock filled the silence between them. I didn't choose a penthouse over Marcus, Meline replied quietly. I chose to protect what I worked for. Her mother shook her head, eyes narrowed. You think that apartment makes you better than him? Is that it? No, Meline said. But it doesn't make me less of a daughter because I'm unwilling to give it away. The old floral couch between them looked exactly like it did in high school, like everything else in this house, unchanged. Except for her mother, whose resentment had grown into something deeper. Something permanent. You were always so cold, even as a child, her mother snapped. Marcus may not be perfect, but he has a heart. Meline's breath caught. I've been sending him money for years. I took care of things when he disappeared for months. I bailed him out of his debts. And he needed it, her mother replied flatly. That's what family does. But what about what I needed? Meline asked, her voice trembling for the first time. When I was working 2 jobs in college. When I was sick and still coding through the night. No one asked if I needed help. You just told me, you're the strong one. Her mother stood up abruptly, as if distance might dissolve the truth. Maybe we expected more from you because we thought you could handle it, she said. That's not the same as neglect. It felt like it, Meline whispered. They stared at each other, and in that space between them, years of unsaid words floated like dust in the air. From the open window, a soft voice called out, Mr. Lasker, the elderly neighbor, leaning over his fence with a watering can. Storm coming, he said to no one in particular. You can smell it. Her mother didn't respond. Meline glanced his way briefly, then turned back. This is what hurts most, Meline continued. Not that Marcus needs help, but that when I say no, I become the villain. You don't know what sacrifice means, her mother said, eyes gleaming with a sharpness that didn't belong to age. Meline stood, straightened her coat, and met her gaze. No, I do. I just finally learned that it shouldn't cost me everything. Her mother flinched as if struck. There was nothing left to say. Meline walked to the door slowly, hand resting on the knob for a moment as if reconsidering. But then she heard her mother's voice one last time. No one loves a daughter who forgets where she comes from. Meline didn't reply. I walked out of my mother's house, and for the first time, I didn't look back. I didn't abandon my family, they abandoned the idea of seeing me as a person. The words rang in Meline's mind like a bell long after she'd spoken them to Chloe during a late-night video call. Her friend had gone quiet on the other end, only nodding softly before saying, that sounds like something you need to write down. So Meline did. Rain tapped gently against the penthouse windows, a soft murmur of life continuing outside. The living room glowed with warm amber light from a floor lamp, throwing gentle shadows onto her journal where a pen waited by an untouched cup of peppermint tea. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened to a fresh page. Writing used to be a habit, college essays, code notebooks, to-do lists. But this was different. This wasn't data. This was truth. The ink bled slowly across the page as she wrote. Today I realized I am not broken. I am just no longer willing to carry someone else's burden and call it love. Meline's breath caught in her throat, not from sadness, but relief. She didn't owe Marcus a future. She didn't owe her mother an explanation. And she didn't owe herself guilt. She thought back to Chloe's voice that night on the call, calm and steady. Your story doesn't end in their living room, Meline. You get to write a new one, with better furniture and stronger walls. They had talked for hours. About childhoods full of gaslighting disguised as concern. About invisible scorecards where boys were graded on potential and girls on compliance. About the lie that love was earned through sacrifice alone. But the moment that struck deepest wasn't Chloe's. It was something her therapist had said weeks earlier, a question she hadn't been ready to answer until now. If your daughter came to you, sobbing, saying her brother was being handed everything while she was left empty, would you tell her to try harder? She wouldn't. She would hold that child and whisper, "You are enough. You've always been enough." The clock ticked on. Outside, the rain softened into a gentle mist. The city dimmed into its nighttime hush. Inside, Meline wrote more. She wrote about childhood report cards waved away, about birthdays spent alone while Marcus got surprise parties, about the sting of her mother's slap and the cold silence that followed. And then, like a breath exhaled after years held in, she wrote, "I don't want revenge. I want peace. And maybe that means never going back." When the tears came, they weren't the sharp ones of anger or shame. They were slow, warm, full of something closer to rebirth. She let them fall freely onto the page. No more hiding. She closed the journal gently and placed it on the windowsill, just as the clouds outside began to shift. A sliver of moonlight broke through, glinting against the glass like a quiet promise. She whispered to the room, not for anyone else to hear, but because she needed to say it out loud. "This time, I choose me. I used to think walking away made me selfish. Now I see, it was the kindest thing I ever did for myself." Meline sat on a warm checkered blanket spread over the amber-tinged grass of Willow Creek Park. Around her, soft laughter and the crackling of a small portable grill blended with the rustling of wind-blown leaves. Autumn had turned the trees into a firework of color, crimson, ochre, gold, and the light slanted gently through the branches as the sun descended, painting long shadows on the lawn. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't need to check it to know who it was. The earlier message from her mother still glared on the screen, filled with winding apologies and veiled guilt. "I didn't know you felt that way, your brother still needs you, we're a family." It ended with a soft command disguised as an invitation, "Come to dinner tonight. Let's try again." And now Marcus was calling. She watched the screen until the buzzing stopped. Then it lit up again. She sighed and finally answered. "I see you're not here," Marcus's voice barked without hello. "You made your point. Congratulations." "I didn't mean to make a point," she replied, calm as still water. "I meant to choose peace." "You're being dramatic." "No," she said, voice quiet but firm. "For once, I'm being honest." The silence on the other end stretched taut. "We've always looked out for each other, Mel," Marcus tried again, softer this time. "You're acting like a stranger." "No," she said again. "I'm acting like someone who finally realized I deserve more than being a second-class daughter." "You think you're better than us now?" "No, Marcus," she said, steady. "I just finally know I'm enough." She ended the call before he could reply. The phone lay face down beside her. The sounds of the park came back, laughter, sizzle, the clink of plastic cups. Chloe plopped down beside her with a lopsided grin, handing her a slice of apple pie wrapped in foil. "They didn't have forks," Chloe said, already biting into hers. "You good?" Meline looked at her. The wind teased strands of her hair into her eyes. Her coat smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. In that moment, everything felt small and real and right. She smiled. "More than okay." Someone told a joke behind them. Laughter spilled into the crisp air. The kind that bubbles up without effort, like the world is briefly lighter. Meline leaned back on her hands, staring into the horizon where the sun brushed gold against the rim of the sky. She thought of all the years she'd tried to earn love, chasing approval, sacrificing space, swallowing words. She thought of the years she'd spent explaining her success like it was a burden, not a triumph. Of how she'd handed over her time, her energy, her joy, bit by bit, to keep a seat at a table where she was never truly fed. Now she was full. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had finally come home.